Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve and today we're taking a look at some key fantasy assets that are popping up in quite a few wildcard drafts out there, and we're going to touch on a few points that may impact your decision on whether to include or exclude these players from your teams. But to start with, do you know what I'm actually really enjoying about this mid-season wildcard that has been granted to everyone? It's about the only time in FPL that I can think of where everyone has a wild card, but no one is actually going to know what the ownership figures for the various players that they're adding to their teams are going to be until gameweek 17 kicks off. Now, at the start of the year, obviously everyone is on unlimited transfers or a sort of wildcard situation, but as players build their teams, they build those teams in game, and so the ownership figures are actually pretty accurate and up to date. However, in a mid-season wildcard, many managers have built up value in various FPL players. Martinelli would be probably one of the most obvious ones. For those of you who got on him very early, his price has shot up right the way through to game week 16. I think he's just been going up and up and up the whole time and currently listed at 6.8%. Now, managers aren't actually going to sit in the real game and go and make transfers, because if you were to transfer Martinelli out and accidentally click on the confirm button, you would immediately lose the value in those players. And so most fantasy managers out there are all currently tinkering away and building their wildcard teams in various transfer planners that are available on the internet. And so the ownership figures that are being shown in game are not at all accurate. For example, Jesus is still owned by 52% of the game, and he's injured and out for the next few months. And so this will probably trip up quite a few casual managers that rely heavily on looking at ownership figures to see what the rest of the game is thinking when it comes to building their wildcard teams. But it was just a little aside. So let's jump on into it and start off with Phil Foden. Now, it was actually exactly 1 year ago that Phil Foden had his first surprise benching that caused a lot of headaches for many managers. This came straight after City had just demolished Leeds 7-0, with Foden pulling in some pretty impressive fantasy returns. But this benching turned out to be due to disciplinary reasons. And so I've pulled up the comments from last Christmas from Pep, where when he was asked why they had been left out of the Newcastle win, they being both Foden and Grealish, Guardiola said, "No, this was not rotation. I decided on this team because they deserve to play, and not the other ones." It's referring to Foden and Grealish. "At Christmas time, I pay a lot of attention to behaviour on and off the pitch. And when off the pitch isn't proper, they're not going to play. We have to be focused all the time because of distractions at Christmas time and everything that happens. You have to still be focused." Now, that was a full year ago, last December. So Foden and Grealish were obviously indulging in the silly season. There were reports, I think, that there was some photos that emerged on one of the publications where Foden and Grealish were out partying the night before and then turning up to the next day to a recovery session at City's under Pep's guise, and Foden and Grealish were a little bit worse for wear, and so they earned themselves a benching. Now, more recently though, Foden has actually had some surprise benchings, and so if I just pull up his figures here. So in game weeks 13, 14 and 15, Foden only managed to make 28 minutes, 13 minutes and 26 minutes. Now, this was after an amazing run through game weeks 8, 9 and 10 where he got 8 points, a hat-trick against Manchester United where he scored 19. That was when Haaland also got his hat-trick in the same game. And then Foden followed it up with a goal and an assist against Southampton in game week 10. He did play the full 90 against Liverpool the following week, but was then benched for 3 consecutive games, which caught me and a lot of other managers off guard. Now, there was no official word that I could find from the City camp as to exactly why Foden was benched throughout this period, but it has been speculated that Foden has been in the naughty books again and has been out partying. Now, this is purely speculation. There's been no, as I said, no official word. And I don't know how accurate that is, because during that period, Foden did start 2 UCL matches during this 3-game Premier League hiatus. And so it could very well be that Pep was just making tactical switches, preferred to play Foden in the Champions League matches rather than what looked to be seemingly easier games in Brighton, Leicester and Fulham, where he was benched for all of those. But it could quite easily have been that perhaps he did misstep and was being taught a lesson, although I don't know why he would still get Champions League minutes if that was the case. And so most of us are looking to triple up on Man City, given their pretty awesome fixture schedule that's upcoming. They kick off the resummation of the season with Leeds away and then Everton at home, before they have Chelsea away and then a double. This double is still tentative on whether or not there needs to be any replays played in the FA Cup. So their double is against Manchester United away and Tottenham at home. They then have Wolves away, Wolves at home, Tottenham away, and then Aston Villa at home. Aston Villa at home is part of the second double for City. Now this one is confirmed, where they have to play Villa at home and Arsenal away. And so 2 doubles with some somewhat tricky fixtures around the fringes, but also kicking off with Leeds away and Everton at home looks incredibly lucrative for those of us who want to invest in 3 City assets. And so the question comes down to, is it Haaland, Cancelo and Kevin De Bruyne, or Haaland, Cancelo and Foden? Or some of you out there are actually looking to go completely without Cancelo, but we'll discuss him in a little bit more detail in a minute. So in my current draft, I'm going with a 3.5 million setup, where I'm going with a triple up of Haaland, De Bruyne and Cancelo, with Kane up front and Darwin, as well as my 3.5 premiums. And when you're going this aggressive with this type of aggressive strategy, you really do want to ensure that the rest of the players that you're banking on do actually pull in minutes. And so the reason that I have gone De Bruyne over Foden is I would absolutely kick myself as a manager if I risked going with Foden, carrying a pretty light bench in a super aggressive setup, only to find Foden ends up being benched through Christmas and the New Year period, knowing full well that when I chose Foden, I was betting against both Pep Roulette, but also that Foden and Grealish can avoid temptation through the silly season. And so I myself am looking to lock in Kevin De Bruyne as my 3rd City asset. But those of you out there who are going with Foden, if the lad does start, he is almost certainly going to bang points. And so if you have the kind of structure that can support a surprise benching from Foden, or you have some good rotating options on your bench, and Foden doesn't even get onto the pitch. Now, it should be said that Foden will probably get onto the pitch. I don't think he's actually missed out a full Premier League match so far. As you can see down here, most of them are 90s. He made a 45-minute appearance against Bournemouth, 54, 70, 70, 57, 90, and then the 3 weeks in a row where he came on as a sub and then played 90 minutes. And so Foden, if he does not start, will most likely come off the bench, and unless he does bits in the last 15-20 minutes of the game, you're probably looking at a 1-pointer from him, and so you have to be very prepared for that if you do choose to go with Phil. Now, next on the list is Diogo Dalot. Now, I have seen him in almost every wildcard draft that seems to be floating about the place, and for very good reason. He's playing in a much stronger United defence now that Ten Hag has been at the helm for a little while, and the strategy is starting to be understood by most of the team, and the players coming in and off the bench. However, both Varane and Martinez featured in the World Cup final, and both of them won't actually be back with the team until sometime next week, meaning they will definitely miss the fixture against Nottingham Forest, but might not also be ready for the following game away to Wolves. Now, if I was a betting man, I would say that, and I am a betting man, I would say that Varane and Martinez are probably going to be back for that second fixture against Wolves, but we just don't know. And so Dalot's clean sheet potential is actually impacted by this, because United won't have their first two centre-backs starting at the beginning of the season. We'll be likely relying on Maguire and Lindelof, and that does quite severely detriment the clean sheet potential for Manchester United. Now, Nottingham Forest is probably the best game to rest Varane or to miss out on Varane and Martinez. It is unlikely, I think, that Nottingham Forest will score even against our backup centre-back pairings. But if Varane and Martinez do miss both Nottingham Forest and Wolves, and as a result Manchester United concede in both those games, the fixtures past that point aren't amazing. So the first three for Manchester United are actually really good. They have Forest at home, Wolves away, and then Bournemouth at home. But then across the next five, it gets a bit more tricky. They host Man City at home. They're then away to Arsenal, so they have to play first and second in the league. They then have Crystal Palace at home, which is probably not too bad of a fixture in terms of defensive returns. But then they have Leeds away and Leicester at home, and these two are kind of tricky fixtures, as both these teams love to attack. And so if you take it all into consideration, it doesn't look as simple or as wrapped up as it probably does on paper. Now, if Manchester United do manage to keep their clean sheets, though, Dalot absolutely rakes in the bonus points. He has earned all 3 bonus points 4 times this season, and 3 of those were due to just the fact that he got a clean sheet. There was no attacking returns in those games. He just kept a clean sheet and managed to get all 3 bonus. And so if United do keep a clean sheet across these fixtures, you almost guarantee Dalot to be a 7 to 9 point fantasy return pick. And so he definitely does warrant careful consideration as to whether or not you start with him in game week 17. Now, if you wanted to do a bit of a wait and see to see whether or not Varane and Martinez's absence is for 2 weeks or just the week, or whether or not it actually has a massive impact on Manchester United, you will actually miss out on those tasty fixtures. So you kind of have to go for Dalot at the start to get all three of those tasty fixtures for United, or potentially just miss out on him completely and delay getting him until maybe game weeks 20. When does it get good again for United? 22 probably. Crystal Palace, Leeds, and then Leicester, but even those are a little bit tricky for United. And so for me, it kind of reinforces, I wouldn't actually have the money to get Dalot in this 3.5 premium setup, but it kind of does give me a little bit more confidence in going with such an aggressive strategy if I am a little bit less assured of the clean sheet potential for some of these high value picks that a lot of managers are putting into their wildcard drafts at the moment. Now, next on the list is João Cancelo, who seems to be getting omitted from quite a few wildcard drafts out there. He is in quite a few, but I have seen quite a few managers looking to go against Cancelo. Now, I think the big factor driving this change is Cancelo's returns for the last 5 game weeks weren't much to write home about. Liverpool, he got 2 points in game week 11, and 2 points against Brighton, kept a clean sheet against Leicester and got 6. He then got sent off against Fulham and got a -2. He served his suspension in one of the other domestic competitions and then was back for game week 16, where he only got 1 point against Brentford at home. And so many managers may be thinking out there, well, why do I want to invest £7.4 million in a very expensive wingback at City when the returns just do not look like they're there? And I think the main impact to why Cancelo hasn't been scoring as well as what he was in the earlier parts of the season is because of Walker's injury. Now, Walker got injured in game week 9 in the match against Manchester United, which saw him out for the rest of the season. And at that point, the following game week, Cancelo managed a goal, an assist, and a clean sheet. Absolutely smashed the fantasy points with 18. But then, as I said, went on to have 5 pretty terrible returns in terms of a premium defensive asset. And the reason for that is without Walker in the team, I think Pep's instructions to Cancelo has been to stay back and to not press as far forward, because they do need a bit of pace for any of those teams who like to counter. Now, Walker is back fit and ready from his injury. He got some minutes for England in the group stages at the World Cup. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be straight back into the City team, and there are a lot of options for Pep to choose from at City. But all things considered, I think Walker will most likely be back on the pitch, which will give Cancelo a lot more license to get forward and into the final third of the game, where we will see a lot more delivery coming in from Cancelo because he is allowed to join in to the attack, and the man loves to shoot on sight and shoot accurately, which is he's already got 2 goals in the first 10 game weeks of the season when Kyle Walker was fit and available, and you'll see his assists down at 2 as well in that same period. And since game week 10, he's actually done pretty much nothing. Now for me, I've had Cancelo since game week 1, so I got him in at 7 million. And transferring him out would mean that I immediately lose 0.2 million. His sale price for me would be 7.2, as you can see on screen. And so if I did want to get Cancelo back, I would need to outlay another 0.2 million if I was going to sell him. And as you can see with this 3.5 premium strategy, I only have 0.1 in the bank, and I am already at the limit of scrimping and saving, with the likes of Patterson, Nico Williams, and McAllister in my team. And some may say even Almiron is a little bit risky, but I am quite happy to be going with Almiron. So those of you out there who are considering leaving Cancelo out of your teams, do be aware that Walker being fit and ready could boost Cancelo's attacking prowess from game week 17 and moving forward. Now, next on the list is Mitrovic, who seems to be in pretty much every wildcard draft I've cast my eyes over. The front three seems to be Haaland, Darwin and Mitrovic, although most of my information is largely coming from other YouTubers and having a look through Twitter to see what's going on there. And so perhaps I am living in a little bit of a bubble when it comes to these sorts of things. But Mitrovic is still sitting on 4 yellow cards from before the break, which means if he does pick up his 5th yellow before playing 19 games, it doesn't mean that it's just at the end of game week 19. They do have to have played 19 games in the season, and considering that there was that cancellation for the Queen's Memorial where all teams missed out, and I think Fulham actually are playing their double to catch up a separate game that they may have missed. It's not until about game week 20 or 21 where Mitrovic has to avoid getting that 5th yellow, otherwise he will be suspended for 1 match. And given Mitrovic's temperament, you can almost bank on the fact that he's probably going to pick up his 5th yellow card before the time delay does expire. And so if you are choosing to start with Mitrovic, you have to have a plan for an exit strategy, or be quite happy with the fact that he may be suspended for a full game week. Now, Fulham do have their double in game week 19, where they play Leicester away and Chelsea at home. And so if Mitrovic happens to pick up his 5th yellow, assuming that he does, in game week 18 against Southampton, he will miss the Leicester match, and that double does no longer become a double. It would just be a home fixture to Chelsea. Similarly, if he was out for that Leicester, like let's say you went into game week 19 with Mitrovic in your team and he picked up his 5th yellow in that Leicester game, at least you get the slightly easier game in that double. But if you were banking on Mitrovic for that double, and a lot of you might even be captaining him for that double, he could potentially be suspended for that second game against Chelsea at home. And so you need to be very careful about what you do there. Now, I've had a quick look at playing around with a wildcard where I drop Kane all the way down to Mitrovic to see what I can do with the rest of the funds. And obviously getting back to Kane is not too easy, considering you will spread the funds if you do drop that far down. You wouldn't be keeping the likes of 5 million in the bank in such a play. But the most likely changes out for Mitrovic would probably be someone like Wilson or Martial. Now, Martial looks like a great pick at United if he can remain fit. And so if I'm playing the devil's advocate here, and you do start with Mitrovic and say he picks up his 5th yellow in game week 18 and he's about to miss the Leicester match as part of his double, you could then find that you drop down to Martial and find that Martial ends up injury prone, and you've just wasted a couple of transfers in the opening 3 fixtures where you're trying to build up a couple of transfers in the bank. And so you just need to be aware of the risk associated with going with these types of players. Now, if you have a very strong bench and you're happy that Mitrovic is just such a great player that you're going to chuck him in regardless, and that is a very viable strategy. Fulham are quite an attacking team. they're not too defensive, and so they do need to score a lot of goals in order to win games, and all of the attack that's generated by Fulham does seem to flow through Mitrovic, and so his fantasy returns are about as high as they get for such a cheap option up front. I'm very tempted to go with Mitrovic, but like I said, in this very aggressive strategy, I do need to be very careful with game time. And Kane, who I'm choosing to put in as my third premium, is also currently sitting on 4 yellow cards. And so he could potentially earn himself a suspension, but Kane is a lot less hot-headed than Mitrovic, and I do not suspect that he will probably pick up his 5th yellow. He'll be quite aware of the fact that he's on 4 yellows and probably will not want to be getting suspended after what's just happened at the World Cup. He will want to come out swinging and putting as many goals in the back of the net as he possibly can. And finally, the last player on the list is Hugo Bueno, who seems to be the sub 4 million pick of the bunch down at Wolves. In the last 5 game weeks, he has started and played every match, and Wolves are a relatively sound defensive team. Their fixtures are also okay. Moving forward, they have Everton away, United at home, Aston Villa away, and West Ham at home, which are all okay fixtures from a defensive standpoint. They then go away to Man City, home to Liverpool, and then their great run starts up again. And so I can see why Bueno is in a lot of teams out there. However, this run of starts came when Wolves were being managed by interim managers, and there was also a couple of injuries in the team, which also saw Totti from Wolves at the same price also get a couple of starts, which I actually had in my team. Managed to catch a couple of his one of his clean sheets there, which was great. However, in the last friendly that was just played by Wolves, which will be the last friendly before game week 17 kicks off, Bueno started on the bench under the new management of, now I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Julen Lopetegui. Bueno started on the bench, came on at half time, so came on at the 46-minute mark for Ait Nouri, who has I think been out for the last 5 weeks. Yeah, he did play 16 minutes in the Brighton fixture, but may have injured that injury that he was on. He looks to be back and fit and being worked back into the team, and so it's anyone's guess as to whether or not Bueno actually keeps his place, even though he has had 5 consecutive starts at the end of the first half of the season. So if you are pulling him in as a playing player, it is quite risky. We do not know whether or not he will get 90 minutes, and he could quite easily come on as a sub and get a string of 1-point appearances. However, if you are just pulling him in as your third bench fodder member for a very cheap player who will probably play 90 minutes if someone else gets injured, then he's a fine pick. But just because you see him in a lot of teams out there, and the fact that he has played the last 5 game weeks of the season, may be a little bit of a red herring for the casual fantasy manager out there. Well, that's it for today's video. If you did make it this far through the video, please do consider giving it a like, and if you would like to be notified about more content coming your way, hit that big red subscribe button and the little bell icon to be notified about all FPL content coming out. And until next time, I'll catch you again shortly. Merry Christmas.